So this is the session, Writing for Young Adults, Getting It Right. And I'll be chairing this session. I am Sophia Cooper, a member of the Tobago Writers Guild. Welcome. With me, I have three persons, and let me introduce them to you. Furthest from me, I have Daniel Dillon. And Daniel is the NGC Bocas Children's Festival Director. Please welcome her. Next in green, Nzinga Job, teacher, writer, and of course, if you were here a bit earlier, you know that she sings. So, welcome, Nzinga. And then, of course, next to me in red and white, I have Lynn Joseph. And Lynn is a finalist in the Burt Award for Caribbean Literature. That's the 2015 edition of the Burt Award. Please welcome Lynn. So we're talking about writing, and I know that although the title is Young Adults and Children, I can safely say the information will be useful for everyone. So let us all gear up to get some information here. So to begin, let me just get a show of hands, the persons who are actively writing. Anyone in the audience? Okay. What about persons who are just interested in reading stuff from local writers? Great. So, to start off, let's just go through some basic information. You know, sometimes people they're trying to get their feet wet, they're trying to get started, so let's go around and one by one, tell me how you got started in terms of the world of literature. Daniel.
Well, I guess it was my grandfather, because I used to be able to parrot off that famous speech in Julius Caesar, friends, Romans, citizens, lend me your ears. And I think it started with this, plus my mother was a teacher, so she was always reading and giving us books to read, and that was what we did in those days, because of course there was no there were no computers. Television was around, but it wasn't something that one looked at all the time. I mean, how many times would you look at Bonanza or I Love Lucy or something like that? So we did read from the time we were kids, yes. We were small. That was how I started with literature.
Nzinga.
Sesame Street. That's it in a nutshell. I would add Enid Blyton. I would add my father telling me things at 8 years old, like neither a lender nor borrower be, for loan oft loses both itself and friend. I would like to say that my mother was very instrumental, because dad is not a child person. And he used to bring Charles Dickens classics for us that were complete and unabridged in fine print for little children. And my mother, she used to get the comic version. She'd get illustrated classics, those little fat books for us. And I think from a very young age, I've been attracted to art, visual art, and I remember seeing this photograph of me as a toddler before I could speak, with a Sesame Street book. That's why I told you Sesame Street is in a nutshell. I was looking at Big Bird, and I remember for a long time I remembered actually turning these thick wooden pages, almost wooden, like cardboard pages of Sesame Street book. And I'm turning pages, and I just love the picture. I remember that's Big Bird from TV, and watching the picture again. And it's also one of the reasons I think that writing and reading have become a little bit played down, because people are losing a connection to the visual nature of the imagery, the symbolism of reading, writing, words, and so on.
Thank you. Lynn.
It had to be, I started, it had to be a Grimm's fairy tale book that I got as a Christmas present when I was maybe 4 years old. And I still remember that blue cover. And so I started reading fairy tales, was how I fell into the whole literature, and always stayed with it all my life, children's and young adult literature. But my mother, it's funny you mentioned Shakespeare because my mother used to read Shakespeare to me and my sister, and we would practice taking parts of, Romeo and Juliet or whatever. And so I grew up reading Shakespeare aloud and also reading fairy tales. So that was my entrance into literature.
Lynn, tell us a bit more about your experience as a finalist in the Burt Award for Caribbean Literature.
Well, I'm a young adult writer. I write young adult and children's books, and I have been writing books for over 20-something years, all published in the States. And then I decided to move back home, so I moved back home to Tobago, and originally from Trinidad, but Tobago is my home. And that was last year, and while I was here, I actually came back the same weekend of Bocas 2014, and I attended that. And I said, well, now that I'm home, I would really like to get back into, well, I started publishing in the States. I never started in Trinidad. And I thought, what a great way to be involved with my home country and be part of the literary scene here. And I thought, well, let me enter this contest. And that's what I did. So it was great. Yeah.
Great. Nzinga, you talked about how the visual played such an important role in reading and writing, but you're a music teacher. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that combination in terms of mixing the art forms and how one would influence the other.
Well, that's a big question, I would say. But it is connected via the visual, because I was fortunate to be born to parents who understand the value of music education, so they took me to piano lessons at age 8, where I had to learn writing and reading of music. And I saw it the same way I saw my learning to actually read and write, which had to do with learning symbols and what they mean, and like learning a code. And so I find as a teacher now, I find it very bewildering as to why students don't want to learn this code, because I find it unlocked so many things for me. But I would say the connection has, for me, I can speak for me, it has to do with the connection between figuring out ways for me to express my feelings and allow myself to be understood by others. For reading and writing, the same thing as for music. I learned how to do more of telling the world about me and my inner world by learning these symbols, which were visual symbols. None of them are braille. You have to see them, and others have to see them for them to be translated or interpreted. So I would say it is a visual connection. It is a visual cognitive connection.
Okay, let's talk more about unlocking the code and sort of breaking down maybe what you see around you and tapping in to whatever interest you would have. And I'll ask Daniel this next question, because as the director for the NGC Bocas Children's event, you must see a lot of young people who are just so enthusiastic about just getting involved. I mean, what are some of the keys to unlocking this code, to just discovering who you are and functioning in this creative space?
I would say keep them curious. Children hate to be bored. We have, particularly in today's world, we have children who are being classified as attention deficit and that type of thing. And it isn't that they're really that way naturally. It is that they're responding to eating a different diet. What they're eating is colors, like Smarties, but it's a world of colors. They're eating a toxic rainbow, so they can't keep still. But they're bright. The way I look at kids is a very simple way, really. If a kid is jumping around, if a child is jumping and moving, I'm happy about that, because I'm also a trained nurse, a cardiac nurse. And the thing about it, I've seen so many children unable to move. So it's always interesting and challenging, and I believe that this is one of the things that we do. We keep them curious. When we began, with this program of a storytelling caravan in the beginning, when we began that caravan, we came up with the idea of assisting and helping the children. As a matter of fact, it was Marina who really got very excited and said, well, what's going to happen when we publish a book? We'll put everybody's name in it so that every child would feel an ownership and take ownership of the project. So it means that if you have a group of, and this is why we try to contain the group to no more than 25, what happens is you try to get a story, a contribution out of each of the participating group. And this technically, you asked me about unlocking the code, right? And so this is the platform on which we operate. As a matter of fact, do I have time? Shall I just show you this? When we began, this is now a coloring book. When we began with the Bocas and the storytelling, we actually did a book a fully illustrated book. And then we realized that children really wanted to be more involved, so we turned the stories into a coloring book. And it just, we can't print enough. We just can't print enough because they're asking for it, and they're coming back every year. That's the other thing about it. Children our challenge now is how to engage new children when we only have groups of 25, because we have children who came 5 years ago and who still want to return every year. It's like a tradition, and they don't care that they may have passed the age. They want to be in there. So this is our platform of operation, really.
So we're looking at
For a
how the opportunities, perhaps these opportunities need to be expanded to give more persons, more young people an opportunity to get published, whether it's physically or online.
Well, we actually, we are looking at something. No single person in the Bocas really, I shouldn't say no single person, but when we create and bring a new idea, we put it to the table of our community, and the board will invite comments from other people as well. And one of the things that we're looking at a program, and we did run a pilot. We ran a very successful pilot in Toko between Matlot, Grand Riviere, and Toko. And the way it goes is that we give a topic, and a couple of schools get together, and we have, as a matter of fact, we're bringing it to Tobago. What happens is that every school then chooses the best story, but it's all on one topic. If we ask them to write about this water bottle, we get stories. They can go historical, legend, anything. But it must be on the water bottle. And the idea is that now we have 5 stories, and then out of the 5, we select one. The selection is done by the teachers, actually. And then the teachers get together. They select from each school a group of children who they know are artists. It could be a shy child sitting in a corner. I was advised that the teachers should do it because the teachers know who's the artist and who's not the artist. So we allow that. And then these children get together and the story is read. And then the children interpret the words with art. So we've gone one step to prevent a boredom. We've expanded their interest, and hopefully we've given them avenues for imagination. As a matter of fact, we do run a program and we call it Windows to the Imagination. Yes, we successfully 300 or so children at City Hall. This year we didn't put it on because the City Hall was being rebuilt. But we have all these children coming from many different backgrounds, from distances, sometimes as far as Guayagayari and so on. And then what happens at the end of it, we run workshops. Yeah.
So there's definitely the space and the room coming for more. Just to make sure that I'm managing the time that we do have left properly, do I have anyone in the audience who'd like to ask a question? Okay. Just checking as we go on. All right. Lynn, you said that you started publishing when you went away, and I'm wondering, why did it happen there and not here?
Well, I was living abroad. I was living in the States, and I went to school there. So when I was 15 years old, it's never too early, when I was 15 years old, I made my life plan and drew up all my goals. And one of the first goals was to be a published author by 25. So I did that, and I happened to be there in the States. After college, I went and worked for a publishing house to apprentice, just to learn really what went into getting a book, writing it, editing it, being selected, and the whole process. And these days, people don't apprentice anymore. They just want to get a job and everything. And actually, I was paid, but I think that apprenticing is such a great art form in itself. So I highly recommend that to anyone who's interested in getting published, to apprentice with either an author or a publishing house or anything. So I just happened to be in the States. Also, at the time, they weren't publishing many multicultural books, even in the United States, and with these big publishers. So when I first started publishing books, all my books were set in Trinidad, and they were some of the first books to be published about our island, and also just multicultural books in general in the States.
Good stuff.
Do you find that it's any easier or harder to continue that here?
Well, the BERT Award is, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's for young adult writers, and it's really promoting the publication of young adult books that are set in the Caribbean, that feature Caribbean characters and themes, which I think is great. I've always been writing, all my books are about the Caribbean, so to actually be able to publish that now here is, like a lifelong dream of mine. But I wasn't seeing that. I wasn't seeing young adult books being published in the Caribbean, and now this is a real push to do that. So I'm hoping lots of people enter this competition. It's a yearly competition. It has a lucrative prize, as well as the top 3 people do get published. So I see a change coming for young adult literature here.
So definitely one of the steps that persons can take is look for those competitions that give you an opportunity to perhaps get published at the end of it. Great. And Zinga, let's talk a bit about how you honed your skills. How did you sort of develop your craft, whether informally or formally?
Okay, well, I was writing from the age of 4, because I had to go to first year at that time, first year infants. And at 6, I think I wrote my first poem about my uncle, how he likes to sing old vintage calypsos and how he doesn't smile and other things like that. My mom thought it was really good, so I have to thank her for giving me confidence as far as that's concerned. By the time I was 8, she was telling me, we should do poems as part of English practice. I had these books she used to, my mother is not a teacher. My mother's a public servant, recently retired, but she was an early education specialist with me. She used to make me and my sister write. Before we went to school, we were doing those dotted line books and things, and she would make sure that I tried to write poetry as a way of doing exercises for the English things that I had to do for school. So by the time I was 8, I was reciting poetry, and I remember her telling me, to deal with stage fright, look at the back. And some people who perform here today would have seen the fruits of that. Whenever you get nervous, look at the back, don't look at people's faces. But I would say it's the way that she tried to help me develop confidence by encouraging the things that I did. by guiding me as I did them, by having the time to guide me, making the time to guide me as I did them, and by giving me practical advice for different things. Even today, I can give my mother anything, and she has a whole bunch of her. She takes a red pen, just like a teacher, and she goes through it. That's my earring. Thank you, Mr. Songman. I will take it up. She would say to me, you know, you have to fix this, you have to fix this grammar, you have to fix that spelling error. No, you can't put it like this. And also she would encourage reading, because with reading you get a sense of what's appropriate in the language use and so on. And I just spent a lot of time fighting her, as I think forget his name, Mr. St. Lucia. Vladimir, right. Vladimir, he talked about how, you know, some people think it's all about work. I used to fight with my mother, the same mother who encouraged me about reading. Oh, you're sitting down and reading, we have things to do. Yeah, go and toil the water, go and X and Y. And, you know, and because she instilled that love of the confidence of writing in me and reading in me, I had the confidence to fight her about it. I want to do this, this is good. I experience joy when I do this. You know, so I would say the parental connection is indispensable. It was not my teachers that I remember doing that with me. It was my mother, and persons often underrate the importance of the parents in a child's development, in a young writer's development. However, there is scope for the teacher, which I guess you'd ask me about later.
Because I was about to ask, as a teacher, and you know, sometimes parents think, you know, once your child going to school, everything all right, the teacher will take care of it, and so on. But you're saying that there's a heavy emphasis on what goes on at home. I mean, even if it's not your mommy and your daddy, maybe it's an auntie or uncle or a grandmother or grandfather, you're saying that there's this heavy emphasis with what happens at home. But tell us about this space for the teacher.
Well, as I like to say, one hand don't clap, right? The teacher is one hand, the parent is the other hand. If the parent is not helping me, the teacher, ain't much that I could do. But if we are helping each other as a teacher, what I like to do is try to find ways that I can make my children, make my students write instead of speak. And unfortunately in the Caribbean, let's talk about Caribbean culture and some of my peeves with it. As Ms. Lorraine said, we are not reading as much as we used to. Not only that, we talk too much. I talk too much, my father tells me, but I would love one day, let's have a day set aside every month where nobody talks and we write notes to each other. They don't write notes in class. You have to tell them, shh, shh, Mrs. Talking. Where's note passing? I used to pass notes. Miss said, don't speak, so we write a note. But they just refuse to do even that. And if I come to class and I say, okay, now you're going to write for me your dream house, make a description of your dream house. Now look at the key words in that. And I want you to think of a melody for music that will help you to, you know, express those words, those key words, things like that. It's pulling teeth, because the parents never write with the children. They never write. I used to write to my mother all the time. She beat me. She got vexed to do something. I wrote her a note. She would read my notes. So now I'm an adult. No, she didn't beat me again, but you know, I remember there was this time I got mad at her for something, and I wrote her a note, and she came and she talked to me about it after. But never in my life was I ever made to feel that writing was not an equally valid form of communication. So this is why up to this day I have gotten into arguments, conflict with persons at work, persons in my other branches of the family for writing notes. Oh, what are you writing a note for? It's so formal, it's so this. I don't understand that, because writing is like me speaking from my heart just as much as me speaking is. And that is something I got from home, but it was not discouraged at school. At school, we used to pass the notes, we wrote things in school. I remember we had extempo competitions in school. That was another thing a teacher, I actually performed some extempo for my students this term, and I asked them, okay, I'm playing the chord progression. Pa pam pa pam. Oh, you come in, you sing this one. So Peter teeth, he looking so yellow. I don't know why, he's not a hygienic fellow or whatever. And what Miss Lorraine said is so true. They lack vocabulary. I have to give them the words. And then, okay, and then they'll sing it again, and I'll be like, but you can't sing that, that's my line. You have to sing your line. Miss, I don't know. Name. You know, so the teacher and the parent have to work hand in hand. And we as a society, as a culture, we are too talky. We never write. So there's no reason for us to read. I try to beg, I have to beg people to text me. Could you text me, please? Text me information, I will not forget it. When you call me, there may be a lot of noise. Somebody may be trying to get my attention. Maybe a police siren will pass. Why can't you just text me? Oh no, that is not, I don't know, I don't have no time for that. All of this contributes to it. If we text our children as parents, they're reading, we texting, we writing, there's reading going on, there's written expression going on. You don't have to use you are for your. You could write the whole thing. It have spell check and predictive text and thing now. Why? What's preventing you?
I was just about to, I was thinking that while you were talking, that one of the things why people talk, they're on the phone all the time. And the whole culture is changing so that people are no longer I don't want to say that people are no longer interested in books, but the younger children are receiving these electronic devices at 3 years old and 4 years old, so that there are children, if we're not careful, who wouldn't understand or remember the texture of a book, because it's all in the air. It's all in the air, and it's true. We can recycle paper. We can print like in India. In India, a book, I went crazy when I went to India, because I went into this place and it was like foils, and it was a dream. It was full of books. And a book that would cost me $200 here was like 5 TT. And when I turned the pages, I realized it was done on cheap newsprint, because they have to print millions, but it was the words were there. So I just went crazy and threw out my clothes and bought books. And came home with books. But anyway.
Lynn, let me ask you to join the conversation, especially on the point of having someone around you to keep you focused on your writing. Did you have anyone like that?
I believe in self-motivation. Keep me focused.
Or was it all internal? Like you had this plan and you knew exactly what you were doing and you just ran with it?
I think like most writers, if I don't write, I would go crazy. So it wasn't about anybody telling me to write. I just could not write. And that's really what it is. If time goes, if more than a month goes by and I haven't written anything, I really feel sick. So writing is like breathing to me.
So naturally the next question is, do you do a lot of writing just for yourself, as in pieces that people don't see?
Yeah, I call that therapy writing. So I think everybody tries to do a little bit of therapy writing. But yes, there's definitely writing I do for myself, and I write it on my phone. Lots of notes. And then there's writing I do just to practice scenes or dialogue and things like that.
Okay. Now we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to wrap up with a few more questions. The next one, I'm going to ask each of our panelists. Finish this sentence for me, Danielle. I am my best self when?
I am my best self when? Well, I'm always my best self. I don't think there's another self. I mean, you don't want to see anybody cry like me. I get homesick. So I was abroad as a director of nursing, and you're supposed to have this straight face walking down these corridors, and I'm working in Saudi Arabia. So everybody's keeping an eye on you. And I would just swing into a corner because I couldn't help it, and I'd start crying. And why was I crying? I was hearing the sound of steel band across the Atlantic. I was smelling the surf in my yarrow, and I was seeing chip, making little bubbles in the sand, and I knew they were sailing down that river in some old tub that they licked together themselves with tires, and that my friend David, who just passed on, was up in a little place he built on the beach that was rose pink, reciting Shakespeare and telling me, Danielle, whatever you do, don't look down after you pass a certain age, no matter what you're saying, because your whole face will fall forward. So that was what I was dreaming. And my doctor, when I came here, said, whatever it is, you have to come home because you have a terrible case of homesickness. And it became chronic. So I came home again, and I'm now part of the tapestry. But I try to be always the self that I am. I wish I could be better. I pray a lot on it. Thank God for my life. You know, what can I say? Yeah, what can I say? I'm a bad girl, a naughty girl. May I quickly read something for us? I want to tell you about Bocas and its influences and what this one. This is Ice Age Trinidad, which is a story in the series. And it was inspired by a cookbook, and I just want to read this part. Mouth open story jump out entertains children, guardians, mummies, daddies, grandparents, and everyone who loves children's literature. Designed for reading aloud and sharing, they are classic and unforgettable children's books. I'm not putting a plug or anything. I'm just saying this. There are magical stories, folklore, animal stories, dreams, fables, and tales about everyday life. These awesome stories are full of surprising twists, turns, and they spark curiosity. That's animating the history of our nation, providing cultural clues and time maps of Trinidad and Tobago, which is what we try to do when we work out the theme for when the Bocas people get together, and we work out a theme, and we give people, children as we go along, the title for a story, and then we get children to contribute in an individual way.
And Zinga, I am my best self when?
When I'm doing what I love, or when I'm planning to do what I love, helping myself do what I love. And what I love is to express, to create, to invent, to innovate in meaning. Because as I said, to me, writing, art, music is all about communicating meaning through symbols. And for music and for speech, you're using audible symbols, sounds we make, but the written version, music, art, all of them, is all about interpreting meaning. I want to be a vessel of meaning that can be passed on to those who come afterwards.
Okay. Lynn, I am my best self when?
When I'm at the beach writing. So I have to be near water at all times. I've always lived near water, within sight of water, even when I was in New York. And that's it. I love, my favorite time of my life is sitting on the beach writing, which I do in Tobago a lot. So.
All right. There is, I think, this sense of self when you're always discovering, rediscovering the art form and who you are in relation to others around you, etc. And so I just want to quickly touch on spirituality as an aspect of meaning and an aspect of being within that creative space. So in one word or a few words, maybe one word would be too difficult, tell me define your spirituality, what that means to you, Danielle.
Spirituality? Well, I try to, and I would like to share that with children too, that we are spirits with bodies, not bodies with spirits. We're spirits with bodies, forever existing. And if you look, just a few words, one word. At any rate, I'll give you a secret. Take a deep breath, visualize a golden light, surround yourself with it, carry it everywhere, share it, and be a light, recognizing that everybody is an harmonious spirit and that love is the furnace that burns us all in a way. It burns us, it fuels us, and it's the only thing that's important. It's what gets us to forgive. It's what sparks our imagination. Without love, everything is dim. That's all. That's my spirituality.
And Zinga, define spirituality.
Few words you said. To me, God is reality. Reality is all the truth and all the principles. So what you sow, you shall reap. That's one of the aspects of God, to me. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. It's also an aspect of God. And as far as I attune myself, align myself, calibrate myself to the reality in whatever way that I am aware of it, and I try every day to keep making myself aware of whatever the reality may be, whether it be an internal reality or an external reality, I am being righteous.
Lynn?
That's a very difficult question. I was going to say, in the words of Bob Marley, one love. But what I really believe in, and I talk to all my young writers about this, is I believe we all have our own unique purpose in life. And finding that purpose is part of the journey, but once you find it or once you're following it, and it can change, by the way, as you journey through life, following that path, really putting all of your energy, your heart, your soul, everything into that, everything lines up. You'd be surprised how everything lines up, and you have health, wealth, love, and perfect self-expression. So that's my spirituality.
Very nice. So Lynn, before we go, I want you to tell the audience a bit about the session that you have coming up next. I think that's a nice introduction to the workshop.
Yes, I'm doing a writing workshop for young adult writing. It's called No Scene, No Story, and it's a semi-technical workshop for people who have been writing on how to really develop a scene for your stories, because a story is really a sequence of scenes that are strung together. So developing that scene will help develop a whole story.
Okay, and that starts at?
I think it starts at 4, yeah.
All right, so that starts at 4 p.m. So that brings us to the end of this session. I hope it was helpful. I do see a hand in the back.
Lynn.
Lynn, in the red and white. Yes.
One thing relates to me. You see the water? I go to the American them by the sea. Or again, emotionally, I was something my crisis. I never told. Hold on by the river. When you walk down the road of what it used to be before as a young fella. And you're in the back, so and you can hear the ripples and the water going away. And it's down by the cocoa then, you will see all the long-time birds that survived from the hurricane. And I could never forget that, forget the day. And I don't know, I writing, I think they're called problems have solutions, beginners have conclusions. So you're going to reap, you said fire, go get heat. And I hear there's a bird used to go, they're to throw in. And I hear the bird saying, stick to it.
Yeah, he's a real poet.
Writing, you see by the sea. Sometimes you need a rivers come through. And what is thinking again is that sometimes when you water anything as true, sometimes when you water, they do different sizes. And they give you different dimensions and
Sound.
The ripple.
Right.
they just come.
He's lovely.
Yes.
So I'm interested in saying.
Well, I definitely believe being part of nature helps so much in expressing yourself in any way, any form of expression, yes.
All right, so that's it for our session on writing for young adults and children, getting it right. We did try to give you a sense of what each person has in terms of their portfolio, to give you a real portrait and a sense of who they are and what they do, and not just writing, but inside out. And that's the aspect of spirituality and how it connects to writing or being in the world and that creative space. and being connected to your environment. So I do hope that you enjoyed it, and stay tuned. We have lots more in terms of the rest of the events for today. Thank you.
Thank